Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm thrilled to introduce you to another remarkable guest who caught my attention through the latest video. His name is Josh Christian, and it was an insightful piece. He shed light on crucial trending topics that are of immense significance for job seekers. And actually, his video reached in few days in 8 days. It's like I see today it's 88K views, 88,000 views. I do recommend you go and watch it. Each topic could be a separate video. We'll try to go on each topic briefly and in summary. So we're fortunate to have Josh today with us, and thank you very much, Josh, for coming. Could you please give us a brief overview of your background and why you chose tech?
Good question. First of all, thank you for having me, Ahmed. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
This is like the first interview I've done on someone's channel, other than just talking on my own. So yeah, I'm humbled and honored to be on your channel. I really do appreciate it. I've seen your other interviews and you're very good at what you do. And I think your channel's going to probably skyrocket in the next probably year or two. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. In terms of my history, right out of high school, I had to make a decision if I was going to go to college and stay in college and do the 4-year route. And I did go to college and I ended up dropping out within the first year because another opportunity came up with a friend of mine who was working in electronics. And I decided that I wanted to go work for him and kind of run my own thing, start a company up with him. And that was kind of you could say, the first event of my life that led to wanting to go in the more engineering direction. And I started working at a company that was building pedals, guitar pedals, like stomp boxes for effects for, like rock music, like reverb pedals, distortion pedals. And I kind of just got into electronics engineering from there. And I built some really what I thought was really cool stuff at the time. Now I look back and maybe it's not so amazing, but yeah, I just built some stuff I really appreciated and loved working on. And from there, that led into another friend of mine who was starting a game company, and he just kept begging me, "You got to come start a game company with me." So I went to go work for him for a little while, and I just got really heavily into game development. And a big part of game development is programming. So I kind of started with what at the time was, it's a little different than what you see as blueprints today, but it basically was a form of blueprints. And that visual scripting led me into actual programming because I kept running into these problems where I needed actual code to solve problems. And I was getting too many limitations with the visual scripting program that we were using. So yeah, I got heavily involved in that. That eventually led to me building my own visual scripting program called Sky, which I sold to another program company about probably 7 years ago now.
You were saying that you're working on a game. I heard from few people that it's the hardest thing to do in coding. If you could share about it for people who are looking to enter into this also.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just to kind of pick up where I left off just a little bit
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
got
sure,
cut
sure.
out. I worked at a couple FANG companies as a senior developer, and I left to go start my own game company, and that's kind of what leads me into what I'm doing now, which is I built my own independent company, and we're only a team of 5 people at the moment, so it's real small. That's including myself. So it's real small, and I like it that way. I like being able to do big things with small budgets and just only a few people. So
And
that's something that
independently also.
absolutely, just having the control and the freedom to do my own thing and to deal with investors myself and not have people above my head telling me constantly what to do. Now, to answer your question on whether it's the most difficult type of programming, I think that depends. I think if you are a serious game developer, like you're doing C++, really low level stuff, you're building engines, you're doing hardcore technology, yeah, of course it's going to be some of the hardest programming that there is. I mean, rocket science uses game engines. Like literally, SpaceX uses game engines to do simulations. So obviously, it's got to be at least as complex as rocket science because it's being
Oh,
used for that as a
that's a new information for me.
yeah, it's not just used there. It's used in automotive industry. It's used in the aerospace industry very heavily. So yeah, I mean, these are very, very sophisticated, complicated tools. When I open up source code for things like Unreal, I'm just like flabbergasted. I've worked on some really
Because I know
complex
from
stuff,
some
but
people who just started and they said they were just doing like it's just like a billiard thing, like a ball, which is pushing a ball, and these guys felt this is very hard. So
it
if
is.
this is hard, so how come like this reality like game that people are developing? I guess it's a very tough job, especially on one person.
Oh yeah, I mean, it definitely can be. There's other times when it's not hard because there is so much that's handled and done for you in modern engines. So, like for example, if you're just making a game where characters just run around, you're populating the world with these assets that you built yourself in Blender or Maya or whatever. So if we're talking about just making animations trigger and things like that, it's not so bad. But when you get into complicated physics and simulations, it is unbelievably complex. It's mind blowing, really.
The other thing is you mentioned the BS jobs. So something that also I hear people complaining about is that the pressure in the company is always on the smart coders or programmers, and these people are not a lot. They are one or two people among a team of I don't know how many, like 20 or 30,
Sometimes a lot, yeah.
and those people are the ones who complain because at the end of the day they are doing the whole thing. And other departments I heard also ask these people, like members of other department, let's say the infrastructure department, are asking those people to give them also information about things that they have, which is not their job to do, but they involve them because they don't know what to do. This is causing a big struggle with these. They are feeling bad. They are feeling like psychologically bad. Like they complain, we do everything, we work like 24 hours. After we go home also we just start to check more things, and the rest are taking vacations. And you spoke about layoffs, that the layoffs are targeting people with hyper specialized jobs. So what impact does this have on the first of all on the company, then on the employees also? And what kind of jobs do you recommend for those who are in vulnerable positions, like the ones that risk getting fired or getting replaced by AI?
Yeah, two really good questions. I think ultimately this is probably a cycle that can't continue forever. So maybe this is a problem that's going to become a past problem soon. But at the same time, we still see hiring that's ridiculous. Because I look at LinkedIn jobs right now and I can still go find job listings that are extremely hyper specific to the point of being almost nonsensical. And everybody's trying to be the next big thing. Everybody's trying to be like Google. We've all heard the story of when Google started, they named their building like
Mhm.
number building number 400 something something because they were trying to pretend like they were bigger than they are, and they had one guy answering the phone saying he's an assistant. It was just a facade. It was fake it till you make it. And I see a lot of startups start like that, and they just, for some reason, it could be just the CEOs, I'm not sure, but for some reason that carries over to the way they hire even once they are big companies. And that was my experience working in at least one of the FANG companies that I worked at. Is you just see this ridiculous attitude of people are completely expendable, and when things go wrong, we'll just cut them and it doesn't matter. And I guess any business, any industry in the world has that sort of short-sighted thinking when profits come above the value of individual employees, and when, of course, the customer and the product itself is pushed aside. As long as you have corporate entities that are sponsoring you, like BlackRock and Vanguard, as long as you're getting money funneled and pumped into your company, that's really all that matters at the end of the day. My advice, I guess, to people that want to be programmers would be to find the relevant fields that you think will be, great fields for 10 years to come, despite what's happening in the industry, despite being treated like you're expendable. The great thing about wearing many hats, the great thing about being a good generalist that knows a lot of different technologies and has great common sense when it comes to understanding Python, understanding web development, maybe not necessarily being a master at any of them, but having good development procedures and going through your education individually and your portfolio individually every maybe 6 months is what I would recommend. Every 6 months, go back and update your skill set, because you could be laid off at any time, and it's going to make it so much easier for you to find another job if that does happen. And in my video, I said that there's not very many good programmers being laid off, and I got a lot of comments down in my video of that, of people who claimed they were good programmers who were laid off. And I feel bad for them because I'm sure it is happening, at least to some extent or another. And I think those people will be able to find jobs. And you just have to find the market niches or the market categories that are still doing well. A good example of this would be PLC and automation. So we have seen maybe Python jobs aren't doing as good as they used to, but that doesn't mean every job's suffering in all of technology. My wife is a PLC programmer and works with Siemens and Ignition. And when she got laid off because one of her companies was really acting stupidly with their hiring practices, she was getting 20 interviews a day, like literally
Mhm.
offers for $150,000 to $300,000 in that range every single day, because it's so in demand. They don't typically teach it at colleges. I had never seen a college program for heavy automation training that involves PLC and Siemens and factory talk and all that. Not to say it doesn't exist. I'm sure some trade schools teach it, but I think it's certainly less saturated, and
Yeah,
that's a
I'm
huge
actually
growing
a
market.
mechanical engineer, my background, and I wasn't exposed to PLC.
Yeah, I'm actually not surprised, but for the people that are controls engineers and are working on that, I mean, it's amazing how much work there is. So, and that's not just that's just one example. That's not the only example. I'm sure there's many other fields. I haven't really looked into it because I'm not looking for work right now. But if I were, that's what I would be looking for. Things like that, where you can actually apply to a job and there's not 2,000 other people, trying to compete with you.
The emergence of generative AI like ChatGPT and the other tools made people also feel a bit scared about their positions. I think you mentioned a programming language, which is the HTML, which will be replaced by generative AI. But for example, Python and the others aren't going to be replaced in the same manner. Could you
Yeah.
explain that?
Well, I like to say that the future is a black box. I had a meeting with the CEO of a relatively large company, probably about 10 years ago now, a long time ago when I very first got into tech, and he was hiring for his company. And he asked me, what is the future? And I said, the future is a big black box. And you just tell it what to do and it does whatever you want. You can have a big screen connected to it, and you just sit there and say, move that button to the left, and it does it for you. Make that button yellow, change that font to Helvetica, and you could build entire user interfaces literally just talking to a box. And that is probably where the future is headed in terms of AI. But you still have to have someone that understands architecture and how they want to structure their company, user experience, all of that, in order for the system to know what it wants. Because if you're a programmer and you don't even know how to do a problem, which, let's be honest, is 90% of programming, right? I never run into a problem and go, oh, I know how to fix this. I mean, it almost never happens. It's usually I run into a problem, I don't know what's wrong, so I have to debug and I have to keep testing and trying to figure out what's wrong. If I can't explain what's wrong to the AI, it's not going to be able to fix the problem for me because it doesn't know what I want. And that's going to be a continual problem, regardless of whether AI becomes really good or not. So I think some people are thinking, oh, AI is just going to go do everything on its own. But you're missing the other side of the picture, which is that people still ultimately have the control over these companies, and they'll still be having to hire people like me, for example, or you, for example, to come in and still train that model or figure out exactly where they want to go with that process. And when we talk about back end logic, really, really high end logic and deep logic, yeah, obviously we're going to run into issues where stuff that's already been done before that's simple to do could probably have templates that are built in. And AI really, if you think about it, I tend to think about it like templates. Not to say that it is, but that's my concept of it. And practically in the work field, I mean, that's what it's going to end up being is how does AI work? They're large language models, right? I mean, they develop the way that they think and the information that they have from what already exists out there that humans have already achieved. So when we deal with problems that haven't been addressed before, AI is going to struggle just as much as a human would because it still doesn't have any more capacity than you do when it comes to figuring out new solutions because computers can't make decisions for themselves. We talk about AI, and some of it's a facade too, because ask AI to pick a random number for you. It can't. It'll do it and it'll seem like it's picking a random number for you, but it's actually not picking a random number for you. It's just using some sort of algorithm with a seed. It's not actually random. It can't actually make decisions on its own. So we still have to have people making decisions behind it regardless. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that it did take everything over and that did replace a lot of jobs. I think companies would actually be concerned about that because then, for example, let's say you have a company that has 1,000 people, they bring in AI, they fire 500 people, AI replaces 500 people. What are those 500 people going to go do? They're going to go become competitors. They're going to go use the same AI that just replaced them to now make their own company and build their own competition as a platform. And companies will ultimately lose power as a result of that. So I think a big part of it is companies want to actually keep hiring people to prevent competition, to prevent innovation in the field, so that they can, keep going the easy route. Not to say all companies do, but certainly I've seen a lot of that in the companies I've worked for.
So you believe the AI revolution is similar to what happened in the past, like the Industrial Revolution? No one was out of that job. They just replaced like the manual labor with the machines, and now today they are replacing like these not so smart machines with smarter machines, and people will always have jobs.
Yeah, I don't know if people will always have every job in every field and industry. I mean, like I said before, CSS and HTML programmers, I mean, a lot of them already have been replaced by just websites like Squarespace and things like that.
Hmm.
I used to see a lot of my friends who were professional web developers lose their jobs just because people would go to template websites like Wix and Squarespace, and they would just make their own websites there instead. And of course, for big companies, that's not the case, but for a lot of independent people that they relied on for their business, like let's say the cupcake bakery down the street that wants a website, they're just going to go to Squarespace. They're not going to hire somebody. So we saw those people have to adjust the way that they work. That doesn't mean that they got decimated. A lot of them still kept their jobs. The route had to change. You have to adjust with the changing
But that
times.
takes us back to the point that if you want more than just a UI, so this tool is doing their job, but if you want more than just the UI, they will need a programmer, don't you think so?
For a long time, yes. I mean, again, like I said, there might be a point in time when everything that's common has already been done, and there may be template systems with
Hmm.
AI, developer tools that will make it to where you need way less people. It may very well become a problem eventually, but I think by the time we hit that point, we're going to see governments wrapping red tape all around it. That's the truth, because there's already calls as we speak. Very few people have actually been replaced by AI yet. Like, look at the writing and publishing industry. Right now, AI is easily good enough to replace every editor in the world. There's no editor out there right now that cannot be replaced by AI. It's good enough. And yet, very few publishing houses are doing mass layoffs. Very few are firing their editors because there is a substantial X factor to the human experience that they know that AI is not going to be able to do it. Like, there's an innovation that humans have that AI is just not ever going to be able to compete with because it can't even choose a random number. Like I said before, so ultimately, that's where the human spirit's going to prevail. With that said, I do think governments are going to step in eventually and start regulating AI and what jobs can be replaced by it. We're seeing that with truckers right now. Like like every government in the world is considering, that I've heard of at least, almost every government's considering doing just wrapping everything in so much red tape that companies can't replace their drivers with AI or self-driving machines. And that would make sense because it would protect millions of jobs. So, there's different ways to look at that. There's going to be the right view of, oh, capitalism must prevail. There's going to be the left view of, oh, we must protect the people, employers, jobs, and we must unionize to prevent this. And I don't think there's any necessarily right answer, but it is interesting, going forward in the future to see what's going to happen.
You mentioned also the CEOs that are not doing a great job. And I actually agree with this, or maybe I agree with this to a certain level, because I actually heard of there's a company which is going fine, and then all employees in this company are working remotely. And suddenly on the new year, the CEO sends them an email and asks them to be hybrid. Why do these people take such decisions? What's the benefit of this? If their work is going well, it's a privilege today to be working remotely. I mean, they may be less productive at in office. And I know this company was built to have remote employees. So what do you think about this?
In terms of the remote being more efficient or less efficient, I can't say because I personally haven't worked remote until I went into game development. And I've always worked hard. I'm a hard worker. I wake up at 8 a.m. and I try to work throughout the whole day. I try to meet all my achievements and do better. But I know a lot of people that don't. I know a lot of people that just sit around and watch TV with their laptop, kind of side doing their
Yeah,
work.
also, yeah, many procrastinate. That's true. That's
Oh,
that's
yeah.
also part of it.
Yeah, when you're in an office environment, of course, they can, your bosses or your managers or whatever can oversee you better for sure and prevent fraud, prevent you from lying on your hours and putting improper hours into your charts. So I think that might be certainly a part of it. A lot of people were forced to move into the remote industry just because of COVID and because of all the government lockdowns on COVID. So it's not that I blame these companies for doing it, but I do think some are regretting it. And like you said about that company wanting people to come back in hybrid, they wouldn't be doing that for no reason. That doesn't make him a good or bad CEO. Maybe he has bad reasons. I don't know. I don't even know the company, so I can't say. But I can say that there are a lot of bad CEOs, and I don't want to point fingers at any specific person for being a bad CEO, but like just look at the biggest CEOs in the world. What are they doing that's innovative? I have not seen anything innovative in a long time. The last CEO I remember really having a big impact on the culture of the company was Steve Jobs, and that was years. That was a decade ago now or more. So, I look at Tim Cook, who replaced him, and Tim Cook is a great businessman. He has made the company grow excellently. They continue to make good products. I think they do a lot of good things. I'm not anti-Apple by any means, so I don't want to come across as an Apple hater or something like that. But I haven't seen a lot of innovation from the company since Steve died. It's been really small little steps. And Apple seems to promote it like they're these huge revolutionary changes every time a new phone comes out that looks exactly the same as the last one or 3 generations ago, as the styles, kind of go square around, square around, square around. That's all I'm seeing. I'm not really seeing a lot of huge innovation. And as hardware slows down, especially, it's going to be a lot harder for hardware companies to innovate. So that's, I think, the last frontier was software. And I just don't see a lot of advancements from Apple. I think the headset that they just came out with is probably their newest, biggest advancement that they've had in a long time. So I'm interested to see where that goes. And I haven't tried out the device yet. I fully plan to test it out, but definitely that's a step towards what is going to be next in the future for tech, because we know we've been using screens for how long now, right? 60, 70 years. So maybe that'll be the next thing. Maybe it won't be. Maybe it'll be a flop, kind of like what Oculus was when it came out. But my point is just even the biggest, most successful, most famous CEOs in the world don't seem to have as much sway over company culture as they used to. And that could just be because of the way companies are structuring themselves now, among a million different other factors I don't really know. But all the companies I've worked at in the FANG industry have had good CEOs financially, but bad CEOs when it comes to really affecting the individual policies of people like myself and my life within the company. I just haven't seen a lot of hands-on approach anymore. It seems to be just a bunch of MBAs kind of doing what's good for stocks, and that seems to be it. And I just don't like that approach. I don't want to be that CEO myself.
So, as if I understand from you that the innovators are the ones who started the company, but then when it went like very popular, they hired like businessmen to be the CEOs and thrive the company. The other thing is your opinion about the recruiters. For example, I had a person who told me about his interviewer. His interviewer is a lead engineer, and he was like asking him for 5 more interviews after the first interview, which to get to know him. Is that common? 3 technical
Yeah.
interviews plus 2 behavioral interviews?
I'll say when I interviewed at Google, they liked me after the first 2 interviews. And then they said, we're going to let you skip the third one because it's a long story. I'm not going to get into it, but basically, to put it in a nutshell, there was going to be like 4 or 5 interviews for working at that company. And I saw this with Facebook. I never worked for Facebook, but I did do interviewing with them at one point in my career. And they wanted, like, I don't know, 3 months worth of interviews. It was something like 3 month long process. Not only is this unfair, but it's absolutely ridiculous, because you shouldn't be hiring people solely on what they know now. A big part of being a company and hiring people isn't hiring them for what they know, but for who they are as people. And I do this in my own company when I hire. I know that if you're the type of person that's a go-getter, if you're a type A personality, you are passionate about your work and you want to learn, they're going to learn and fit themselves into the role that you put them in. I think a surprisingly efficient manner. And companies, again, like I've said before, because they want this hyper specialization now, they want to find people that fit these really niche holes, really specific people with really specific skill sets. And that's why they're doing so many interviews. They're not doing that for no reason. I think another big part of it too, and this is something I've witnessed only in the last maybe year. I don't think I noticed this 5 years ago, but I've seen a huge amount, and I'm talking like thousands and thousands and thousands of fake job listings. So like right now, I could go apply to 100 job listings, and there will be several, if not hundreds probably, that would get back to me immediately. Like as soon as I apply, they get back to me with an automatic generated email saying, "We're sorry, but you don't fit the blank space we're trying to put you in here at the company," when they haven't even had time. In fact, I actually noticed this with a friend of mine just a few weeks ago. They don't even have time to read the resume. So a friend of mine, I helped him get a job recently, and we applied to over 1,000 jobs on LinkedIn. And I would say probably 500 didn't get back to him, and about 400 something got back to him very quickly, saying that he didn't have the skill set they wanted, even though he very much so did. And it made me think, did these people even actually read the resume? Are these job listings even real? And then I kind of did some more deep diving into it, and I found that these companies have been posting these same listings, many of them for years, without filling that role. And it made me kind of realize, oh, I see what's happening now. These companies are promoting their company and how fast it's growing and how well it's doing, how strong their economy is, by posting fake listings to make it look like they're hiring when they're really not. So if you find yourself applying to thousands of jobs and nobody gets back to you, it's very possible that a lot of those weren't even real jobs to begin with, and they're not hiring anybody to fit that role.
This
So
is
yeah,
the
I
thing
thought that
also
was
with people who are applying for the largest companies, not just in tech, even in manufacturing and other companies, like just a very popular name. Well, they'll say, okay, we won't apply. We know the answer. This is what's happening among the like psychologically among the interviewees or the people who are seeking the jobs. And this has been going on for a long time, but even in tech, which has tons of jobs, it's really strange. Why would this happen? Also, you said generalist and not specialist. Are you able to be a generalist among programming languages? For example, as you said, HTML, then it will be replaced. So a guy, let's say, who's specialized in HTML now needs to learn something else. So how does he know his job is in danger?
I think a lot of people kind of misconstrued what I was saying. They try to spin it as I'm saying you shouldn't focus on any specialization. That's not my point. It's not what I was saying. It's just if we look at it as a triangle, colleges are, in my experience at least, and a lot of people I know coming out of college now, colleges are teaching backwards, right? You should be learning logic first. It doesn't even matter if there's a language or not. In fact, I'm thinking about doing my own series on YouTube about agnostic language learning, just for logic and for ladder logic, things like that, because I think people are trying too hard to learn React first. I see so many people that are brand new to programming and they're just jumping into React. And to me, that doesn't make sense. You should be picking up books on how software is designed, on software
Mhm.
architecture. You should be picking up books on how logic works. There's some great books like Grokking Algorithms and Computer Science Distilled. You should be picking up those books and you should be learning computer science as a whole. You should be learning how algorithms work. And then you can kind of abstract that down into a specialization over time.
That's
And
that's
then you are a
exactly what
generalist.
that's exactly what I wanted to hear from you because at this point the person or the employee won't be afraid. He knows how everything works because it's maybe like I'll give an example. Maybe it's just a different syntax which he needs to adapt to and that's it. But he knows the
Yep.
logic. He knows how the computer works. But people don't think this way.
Yep.
It's great that you mentioned this. People think like Python, we will lose this Python role. Oh, we need to learn something which is, uh, I mean, does the same job but with another syntax. So yeah,
Yep.
it's a bit confusing here. And mostly are people who did not start with the basics. So what you said about having a book on computer science and the logic to learn the logic of how the fundamentals, which are the most necessary, yeah, that's great. So you're the type of person you dropped out of college. So do you have the same view as my previous guest? Because you people seem like you want to do things, make things happen. You want to be more practical. And this is not how other people think. They think, oh, we have to go for education. So
Yeah.
what's your point about this? And what do you what's your advice?
Well, the tech industry is very unique in that way. In fact, that's a big part of what led me to technology to begin with, especially software. It's always been an industry that's very forward thinking and very understanding that there's a lot of different places to learn. I've done interviews before where I told people, no, I didn't go to college because I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to do it myself and just read books and understand foundations myself. I wanted to be a self starter. And this has always been an industry that rewards that line of thinking. I have never, ever in an interview, not a single time in all the interviews I've done, and I've done hundreds, I've never had someone berate me for not going to college. I've never had anybody look down on me for it. So, and
Mhm.
I'm sure that's not true in every industry. Probably in a lot of industries, they would just, say goodbye basically if you didn't go to college. But that's the one great thing about this industry is it's
Not
always been
just
forward
college,
thinking.
like college, and they want the high grades, and they want to
Yep.
see like A plus, and they
Yes,
want to
yes.
see a high GPA. So you don't agree with this?
Yeah, I think in technology, there's always going to be some old-fashioned thinkers, and I have seen some people. I just haven't interviewed with them. But in my experience, most new startups, most new companies, and even a lot of the big FANG companies probably value experience even more than college education. So as long as you have a good portfolio, as long as you've worked on some good independent projects or maybe some open source projects like Blender or something, you can always contribute to those for free. Yeah, as long as you have experience doing stuff like that, I don't think anybody's going to look down upon you. Experience will always be more valuable in most industries than education, especially formal hierarchical education like we see from Harvard or Stanford or something. So yeah, I think as long as you work hard and you love what you're doing and you build a good portfolio, if you have the experience, I don't think people are going to look down upon you for it. So I wouldn't worry about the college experience necessarily.